Everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of your time. Thanks for being here, especially during a holiday week. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I'm going to get the recording started. Okay, so we're recording today, just as a quick reminder. You will receive a copy of the recording automatically. And we are also live streaming on YouTube, and you can watch the video as well later on too. So thanks for being here. We're going to be talking about dealing with difficult coworkers or employees. And what we focus on related to this topic is how to leverage some different, pretty easy to use, I think, coaching skills to help you manage your professional relationships. And we greatly appreciate your time here today. This is one of our more popular topics. Fortunately or unfortunately, that a lot of people are dealing with these types of situations, especially with layoffs continuing and people getting kind of overloaded with work and different situations related to that. Times can be a little bit stressful. So let's go ahead and dive in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a certified career coach, speaker, and author. I've been coaching and training since 2002, so it's been a long time. And I have undergraduate degrees from Vanderbilt University and a graduate degree from the University of Illinois. And we help people with their career transition, making it as smooth and effective as possible. And then we also work with our clients well beyond that through executive coaching, but also just professional development coaching to help them improve their professional relationships, become a better manager, work more effectively with their teams, build effective teams, and all of that really good stuff. And the advice that we're going to give you today is advice that we give to all of our clients and have done so for the past 25 years. So for those of you just joining us, as a reminder, you will receive a copy of the recording. You should be able to see my slides as we progress here today. And if you would just put in the chat or in the Q&A, if you cannot see my slides, please let me know because I want to make sure that you guys can see those. So let's talk first about why this is an important topic. I just mentioned that this is one of our higher registration numbers for webinars. So I find that it's always an important topic, no matter where you are in the stage of your career. And what was interesting for me, and I think interesting for a lot of people, is if you take a look at the stats on this next slide, when I first started presenting on this topic a long time ago, I was actually kind of surprised and startled by these statistics that between 60 and 80% of difficulties in organizations, it's not about people's work performance. It's because of strained relationships or ineffective or lack of communication within teams and between employees. 84% of workers have had at least one toxic coworker during their lifetime. So part of this is to know too that you're not alone. This is a normal, unfortunately, situation. And the fact, if you look at the bottom left-hand side of the slide, that a typical manager spends between 25% and 40% of their time dealing with workplace issues, that's a huge amount of time. And this is why some of our clients actually will point blank tell us they do not want to be a manager because they don't want to have to deal with people issues. It's understandable because this can be really, really frustrating, and we want to help you with this as much as possible today. When you add on top of just regular workplace issues, when you have a team or if you have anyone that you work with or for, et cetera, that are working remotely or in a hybrid model, that just kind of lays a whole nother level of stress and difficulty to the situation. People can feel less connected when they're not coming into the office. They don't have that context of what's going on. And so we love the hybrid or remote work model. We've done this for 25 years, but we also know that there are things and challenges that come with it that you've got to pay attention to when you're dealing with these strained relationships. And the final reason why this is so important is work environment is a make or break for people's satisfaction at work. This is the career model that we use to help our clients be more effective managers, employees, and find the greater fulfillment and success in their career. And work environment is something that our clients tell us all the time is something that is a make or break for their job. Like they may be in the perfect place in the perfect role, doing something that they really love. But if they're in the wrong culture or if their boss is difficult, they're going to leave. So it's a really big deal. Let's look at what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about coaching skills and some agreements that you can make with your coworkers and your employees to help you have better working relationships with them. We'll give you 3 foundational coaching tools that we find are really, really helpful, and we'll give you some resources along the way. So let's talk first about common obstacles that we find with our clients that are the most common for effective conflict management. And we want you to think first. We're not going to do a formal poll here today because we just have the 30 minutes. But the first thing we want you to think about right now is to think about, okay, where do you fall on this spectrum? Do you avoid conflict? Do you get anxious thinking about it or having to deal with it? Or are you like, I don't know how to handle conflict effectively? Or is it all 3? The reason why we want you to think about your most common obstacles first and upfront, because that's going to tell you the tools that you need to pick up on from what we're talking about today. And those fears that you need to address or limiting beliefs or whatever goes on there, you cannot deal with strained or ineffective relationships in a better way unless you know what's coming from inside of you, like what your fears are, et cetera, et cetera. So write that down for us first so that you're clear on, okay, what happens to me when it comes to strained relationships or conflict, and where are the areas that I need to focus first, okay? What we want to show you on this next slide is, in order to manage conflict more effectively, there are certain things that need to be in place. And when I talk about conflict here, I realize that for some of you, there may be conflict, sure. But for other of you, it may not be like out and out right conflict. It may be just more about someone who complains a lot or whatever it is. The tools and tips that we're giving you will go across the board today, regardless of your situation. You have to have a foundation of these 6 things within your professional relationships for them to be effective and successful. You've got to have at least some level of trust, empathy, that you all can be at least a little bit honest with each other or moving in that direction, that you've got an effective feedback loop, effective communication skills so that you can talk with each other about these difficult things in a productive way. You want to be able to show other people and have them show you understanding, and you have to have effective listening skills, okay? So let's talk about 3 foundational tools that we have found with our clients can help them manage these difficult work relationships more effectively and get on a better path. And what we want to say here too, before we dive in, is this is not a magic wand. It's not like things are suddenly going to become peaches and cream tomorrow. It takes time to develop those foundational things that we were just talking about on the previous slide. We're trying to work in a positive direction here. And these 3 things, creating an agreement together, you getting better at, and hopefully they will too, but empathetic listening, and getting better with your muscle, so to speak, or tool of being curious and leveraging curiosity. We'll talk about that more today too. Now, I just said something about the other person doing the same thing. We can't control what other people do. So the best that you can do here is lead the way, lead the charge in being a better professional, better manager, better coworker by trying these things. And what we want you to know is if you are in a really toxic environment, you may need to think about whether that is the place that is best for you to stay in the long run. And also, it may be that you need to get some help from human resources or from your manager or something like that to help kind of intervene with really toxic situations. Try these things as a starting point, but if it gets to that point, just know that there may be additional help needed. Let's talk about our first tool. And this is our number 1, is creating an agreement with the different people within your team that you manage, or just with your coworkers, one-on-one or as a group. We love these, this idea of team charters, and you can use it kind of across the board for so many different situations. And here's the deal with this. If you look on the right-hand side of this slide, what we're talking about here is an agreement for how you work together more effectively. And some of the things that you can discuss are things like, what are our guidelines for communication, meetings, tasks? How do we handle these things? How do we communicate more effectively? Is it in person? Is it over the phone or a Zoom meeting? Or are some things okay for emails? But get really specific with these types of things, because if you talk about this stuff versus just doing your work all day, every day, you're going to be able to come up with ways that you can work together more effectively. You want to talk about meetings. How often are you meeting? Do you need to meet more frequently, less frequently, for a longer or shorter period of time? We all know that most of us are in meeting overload. So usually it's shortening them to a certain extent. You want to talk about the roles that you play in your projects and the tasks that you perform. Are you each playing to your strengths? Are you in the right role, or do you need to make some shifts here? Another place to have an agreement and discuss this openly is to say, how can we better handle conflict, disagreements, or feedback? Is it better to, do you prefer, for example, to receive feedback via email because you're more introverted and you need to chew on it a little bit first, and then you guys can talk about it? Or is it better to handle it in a different way? When you have a conversation about an agreement with someone and how you can work together more effectively, one of the things we would recommend is ask them their opinion first. But obviously, you have your own ideas and suggestions. But let the other person talk first is usually the best way to allow them to be a little bit more empowered, have them feel heard, you're listening effectively, et cetera, et cetera. And some great questions that you can ask the other person and ask yourself to come up with this agreement is, how can we work together more effectively? How can we get through this difficulty or this disagreement collaboratively? The bottom line here, and we'll look at this next slide for additional ideas with an agreement, is to talk about how you work together and develop that kind of clarity about it, not just performing the tasks and getting into the grunt work all day, every day, so to speak. Some additional agreements that you can include and discuss to help prevent or manage conflict or difficult situations are things like, what are our objectives here? And is everyone on the same page? Because some people may not be. What are the roles that you play based on your strengths, and making sure every person is in the right seat on the bus? You can discuss, and we encourage you to discuss, challenges you've encountered in the past, and what are some of the challenges we may encounter in the future, and how can we tackle those? And finally, develop milestones so that you know when you're being successful, when you're being more effective together, et cetera, et cetera. So think about whether you've created an agreement like this, even if it was informal with someone. And what we would encourage you to do is to have it be more formalized. You don't have to put it in writing, but when it's a team charter, we want people to put it in writing, because then you've got something to point to. And if you're having a really difficult time with someone, we would recommend that you put these agreements in writing, because again, then you're pointing back to something. It's less about you guys and more about, this is the agreement we came up with together. Now let's talk next about communication in touchy situations specifically. If you've got to have a difficult conversation with someone, a few things we want to suggest is on the left-hand side of the slide here. It's a really good idea to set the tone of the conversation before you even get started. Let them know that you need to talk about something that may be difficult to discuss, but that you care about them as a professional, or you care about your working relationship, and your intention is to get to a better place. Ask permission to talk about that at the time that you're going into the conversation. I've got something touchy I need to share with you, but it's really important. Is it okay that we talk about it right now? I want to make this as comfortable as we possibly can. And after you share whatever the conversation point is, or the question, or feedback is that you need to give them, let them talk for a few minutes after you share, because they may need to vent a little bit and get something off their chest. And when you're having a touchy conversation, look at the right-hand side of the slide here. We really want you to pay attention to your body language, because we know that people get stressed out and can get anxious about these situations. So mentally prepare yourself in advance, take some deep breaths, prepare or visualize how you want the conversation to go, have an affirmation, and be mindful of your body language during the course of the conversation. Make sure that you're giving them eye contact, that you're nodding to show empathy and understanding, that you're leaning forward to listen, that you're giving them the attention that they deserve, and you're showing that you're listening, because that's going to help diffuse a touchy situation. Okay. As part of tool number one, just to kind of finalize our thoughts with this before we get to our second tool, the reason why an agreement can be really helpful is it empowers or forces, in a way, each person to take responsibility, because you're asking them too, how can we work together more effectively? And you're asking them for an answer. They're empowered, but also forced in a way, in a good way, to take responsibility and ownership for the relationship. The second reason why they're helpful is it can help you establish clear boundaries for a safer space. So if you're like, look, if you come in with feedback to give me right then and there, I'm fine with that, but I need to ask you to be productive and professional and respectful about it, because that is a really important boundary for me. And at times, honestly, I haven't always felt that way in the past. The third reason why these agreements can be helpful is it helps create ground rules for clarity. We would recommend that you periodically update them over time. But again, when you've got a team charter, it's not about you guys as much. You're pointing to, here's what we agreed to. Now, listen, I want you to know before we get to the next tool, again, this isn't some magic wand. You don't have to come up with a completely full, effective agreement tomorrow. You can talk about the pieces of it step by step over time. But we would encourage you to start thinking about this and having these conversations, not just with your team, but with the people that you're having difficulty with, to say, look, I'd really like to talk about how we can try to work together more effectively and see if we can come up with some ideas together. If we can't right now, that's fine. We may need to just talk about certain things at the beginning and move on and, develop this over time. But I feel like we need to do something. Let's talk about tool number two. And this is empathetic listening. Now, I know most of us have heard, okay, effective listening. I've heard that ad nauseum throughout the course of my career. I get it, okay? But there's a different way that we want to think about quote unquote listening according to coaching tools, terms, strengths, however you want to see it, okay? So these are some of the things that we use with our clients to help us get better with our empathetic listening. The reason why this is so important is even though people will say, oh yeah, I'm a great listener, they will often demonstrate to us, not quite. We want you to get a little bit better. So here's the deal. Everything in the workplace involves communication, bottom line. And that is one of the main problems in the workplace and causes issues. Two-way communication is critical. It can't just be a one-way street. We know and recognize if you're a manager, you have to make decisions. You can't listen to what everybody says and just go with their opinion. I get that. But you at least need to have them feel heard in some way, shape, or form. And not everyone is as good at listening as they think they are. And the key here is we want you to get better at and at least evaluate how good you are at showing understanding and empathy. There are 3 levels of listening that we use in coaching. The first 2 are on this slide. So let me explain these for just a second. So this internal listening, we want you to be more mindful of when you're doing that, when you're listening to your own inner voice. It could be things like, this person is crazy. Why are they saying this to me? This meeting is really boring and going too long. I'm hungry. This sounds hard. Or it could be judgment about the other person in the situation that could influence and impact your effective communication. And we want you to really pay attention to that one. How many times have you sat there and not really listened to what the other person was saying, but you were formulating your next question, right? I'm raising my hand over here. That happens to me all the time. So we need to have internal listening because it's self-care, but you've got to be paying attention to when you're formulating judgments and opinions about the situation or someone else that may impact your ability to really understand where they're coming from. Level 2 listening is focused on the other person, where you're actually really listening and you're listening to each word, but you're also paying attention to their nonverbals. Just in case they are saying yes to you, for example, but their body language is telling you no, you need to call that out and say, you know what? I hear you. I'm listening to what you're saying, but it kind of feels to me like you're not totally on board with this. Can we talk about that a little bit more? Or maybe I'm totally wrong. We want leaders and effective listeners to be at levels 2 and 3 as much as possible. Level 3 listening is what we call global listening. It's where you're paying attention to the energy in the room, the energy between you, the energy within your team, and what is really going on there, and what do you need to address or pull out that people are not discussing, they're keeping to themselves, or whatever it is. And the ways to get in this place of global listening is to be quiet more so than not sometimes. Like, talk less, listen more. Still your body, slow down your talking and your speaking sometimes too, so that you are allowing more space and time for people to process information, so that you don't step over something that someone is telling you. And normally in the rush of the meeting, you would just skip over it and go to the next agenda item. But you realize, ooh, I need to pick up on that with them later on, one-on-one. It's okay sometimes if someone is skipping over something on their end, you may need to interrupt them and say, hey, sorry to interrupt you, but can I ask you this quick question about that? Because I think it's really important. And as part of global listening too, we want you to get better at asking questions rather than giving advice. And we'll show you why that's important in our tool number 3 here in a moment. An active listening exercise that you could take on if you get out your pen and paper to write down a tool, or not a tool necessarily, but an exercise, I should say. And this could be great for Thanksgiving when you're sitting down with friends, family, loved ones. Have someone tell you or talk about a problem that they're struggling with. And maybe they'll share this with you just over the dinner table, kind of regardless. But practice only paraphrasing back what they say to you. Don't ask them questions. Don't give advice. Try that one first. And then a second exercise to help you with this could be that you only ask questions and you give no advice. And at first, this may sound like, that's not that hard. But believe me, it's human nature. We all want to give advice and be helpful. And sometimes, understandably, me too, we want to be right, and help someone out as part of that. So it's actually really hard, or can be very difficult to practice with this active listening exercise, but it's a really good way to get you in the mode of this level 3 listening more and more when you exercise or develop this muscle of just really being quiet, listening, and paraphrasing back so that someone feels heard. And asking a question versus jumping in with your thought or opinion can be incredibly powerful for people. Let's talk about, as part of tool number 2 in this active listening, is to get better at understanding what people need. Anyone as part of an organization, they need these 4 things. Okay, so this is a model from the Gallup organization, who owns the StrengthsFinder. And this is what they assert are the 4 needs of followers, quote unquote. Followers just being anyone who's part of an organization, including you. And when you're thinking about the difficulty that you're having with a coworker or with your team, this can be a great tool to help you assess what is missing and may be going on here. Is there a lack of, trust, a lack of compassion, a lack of a sense of stability in their job or using their strengths effectively and being successful, or a lack of hope? And the items here to the right and the left of the model kind of go deeper into, if you need to establish greater trust, these are some of the things that you want to check in on if they're lacking within your team. We shared this with one of our clients a long time ago who, just a really good example of this. And she was able to point to, just by looking at this model, why all of the breakdowns were happening within her organization. It was based on one of these 4 things. So you want to understand for yourself and for others, these are some good questions to ask for greater understanding. What are your needs, and are they being met? And the same with your coworkers. And is that part of what's going on and causing these problems, and why they're frustrated, upset, angry, whatever's going on? Is part of your difficulty with them a clash of values or priorities? Do you understand what their values are and what your values are as well? And could it be a clash of those things? Gaining a deeper understanding of people's needs, values, and priorities can help you overcome obstacles and difficulties with them, because you can start to see what's really going on underneath the surface and address those things, just versus trying to fix some superficial, it's just this one-time issue or problem. Go a little bit deeper, and doing so can help you address recurring problems over time. Really quickly, before we get to our next tool today, we provide these webinars complimentary to alumni and to our clients. And if anyone out there knows someone that would be interested in or benefit from coaching, please send them to our website. I'd be happy to talk with them. And anyone who's interested in it for themselves today, please feel free to reach out. We always do a free strategy session. It's a consultation to help understand if we're the right coaches to help you. So it's an opportunity to learn about our coaching services. And we also offer a discount for Georgia State alumni as well. So ask us about that. To set that up, you can either go to our website or you can email us at admin@createyourcareerpath.com. That is also where you can get a copy of our slides. So please feel free to email us at that email address as well if you'd like to get our slides to have them for reference. Before we go today, let's talk about tool number 3. And this is one of my favorite ones because it's so impactful and powerful, but also really easy to implement. This is the tool of curiosity. And instead, again, of telling someone what you think they should do, your opinion, or offering judgment or getting frustrated, which I totally understand it can happen, but going to a place of curiosity instead first. And what we mean by this is being curious versus judging or going to anger helps diffuse a conflict. And what we want you to start practicing with too, another really great exercise, is to practice with this idea of powerful questions. Powerful questions, some examples are on the left-hand side here of the slide, but they're very open-ended questions. They're kind of childlike. There's no judgment in them. And they allow the other person to play around with their own answers, to really dig deeper about what's going on for them. And the bottom line with powerful questions, which is so great about them, is 2 things. They are not yes or no. The person cannot answer yes or no. And the other thing that we like, if you look at the examples on the left-hand side here, is that they assume a positive outcome. There's no room for saying, no, this isn't going to work, or no, we're never going to be able to work through this. And I get sometimes it may feel that way. And this is where you may need to get some additional help. But questions like, how can we improve our working relationship? What's the best way to accomplish this goal without conflict going forward? Powerful questions can be 2 types of questions, information gathering or curious. The ones on the previous slide are more curious, and information gathering can be just as powerful and helpful too. And we want you to play around with both. This is a great time to do this over Thanksgiving dinner, for example, if that's something that you celebrate. And as part of being curious and leveraging curiosity as a muscle and a tool a little bit more, we want you to work on, or we would suggest, I should say, because I apologize, I don't know what your situation is, but just at least consider self-management. Like, are there areas where you need to self-manage a little bit more? Work towards understanding first, empathizing and asking questions, then trying to come up with a solution. And the quote unquote or an effective assertive communication formula is listed here on this slide. And we want you to use this too, or highly recommend it. Show understanding first. It will get you to a better place at the end, I promise. State the facts of what's going on, taking the emotions out of it. And offering a resolution, but also asking them for what their opinion would be on a resolution. All of these things that we're talking about today are related to this idea of emotional intelligence in the workplace and how important it is for more effective relationships. The definition is listed on this slide. And one of the books that we recommend to people who need a little bit more help with either their emotional intelligence at work or diffusing or dealing with conflict and difficulties, we like this book from Daniel Goleman. He's like the father, so to speak, of emotional intelligence. Working with emotional intelligence, it can be a really helpful read for you to kind of follow up with this. And there are 2 types of emotional intelligence, just really quickly. Practical emotional intelligence, where you show up on time, excuse me, you meet your deadlines, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the emotional piece of it too. Being a good listener, being really doing a good job about respecting other people and their boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And there's 4 basic elements that we would like you to pay attention to as it relates to emotional intelligence. And these are things that you can consider where you may fall a little bit shorter and where you are really strong, and places where you can work on a little bit more. The 4 elements of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And the tools that we've given you today can actually help you with all of these pieces. And what we hope is that they're pretty easy to implement and understand and kind of figure out. Finally, before we go today, as a reminder, you'll get a copy of our recording. If you'd like our slides, you can get them. The email's at the bottom there. But we'd like you to walk away with at least one action step that you will agree to take in the next couple of weeks. It could be that, look, I'm willing to float this idea of creating a professional agreement with one of my difficult coworkers to see if we can come up with some agreements or guidelines about how we can work together more effectively. And I can ask them, what are some of their needs and what's going on for them, and share what mine are as well. We'd also highly recommend the active listening exercise, and part of that, or as part of that, practicing with some really good, powerful questions. That's an awesome one that we absolutely love. Okay. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a great Thanksgiving. Let us know if you'd like to learn a little bit more about our coaching services. We'd be happy to talk with you. You use the same email address at the bottom. Have a great